So how's everybody doing?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So I have a feeling like how it usually works at this point, a portion of you have gotten some version of the character to working game. And then there's a handful of different errors that a lot of you start getting. So how many of you are getting the error I'm getting of when I start playing, my character just slides around? Anybody getting this one? Okay, so anybody getting an error where your character is coming in sideways or backwards or laying on their back?
That's why I hated disruption. Because it just did that.
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of reasons that's happening if you're getting that. Anybody getting that one?
I think the first one.
The first one? So I can show you how to fix the first one pretty easy. The second one, if your character's coming in like laying on its back, what's actually happening there is Maya works a little differently than every other 3D program that exists, including Unreal. So we have the three axes, X, Y, and Z, right? In Maya, Y is up, right? So Maya thinks that like the 2D plane, X and Y, is the front view, right? And then Z is the one that moves closer to you. Every other program thinks that Z is up, and X and Y, like your 2D plane, is looking downward, right? Including Unreal. Unreal is a Z up world. 3D Studio Max is a Z up world. I think Blender. Maya is a Y up world.
But that's incorrect though. Like physics, like that's not.
It's pronounced GIF. No, I get you. I like Y up, but it's because I'm so familiar with Maya. Like to me, I always think Z is diff. But whatever. Like tomato, tomato. I say that, tomato, tomato. If I ever hear somebody call it a tomato, I'm like, you're wrong. Like, I've never heard a real person use tomato like daily. But again, I live in Tennessee. So the issue with that is that when we export out a Z or a Y up world from Maya, they recognize that this is an issue, and the FBX export and the Unreal import tries to fix it, but sometimes in their effort to fix it, it actually screws it up. And so if that's happening, there's a couple of ways we can do it when we export it. There's an option to change in the export that it should be Z up. Or when you're importing it, you can change it there. Or you could just go to Maya, and in your settings and preferences, you can tell it, I want you to think of the world as Z up, right? So that's one of the issues that some people have, and a couple of those things will fix it. Yes?
You told Maya to start thinking of Z as up. Would you have to change all of your Y and Z values?
What will end up happening, it's your world Y and Z, your locals would still stay the same, your locals are what control your rotation. But what would happen is in Maya, your character would be laying on its back. And so what you'd have to do is just rotate it 90 degrees with your placement controller and just keep working, right? And I've run into this a few times. Usually it's not an issue. It seems like on a couple of the Truong rigs we were getting that issue. And so it's not like a simple, oh, just click this button. It's kind of like you have to mess around with all those things until you get it to work right. Yes?
So the way, I didn't actually change it in Maya. When I imported it, I rotated the landing. Is that okay?
So yeah, so that's also the other thing is you can rotate it after you get it into Unreal, right? You can go ahead and have it coming in, running on their back. Ideally, if you were in a bigger production, that wouldn't be a finished answer. Like they would want it to just come in clean, because they may go in there and try to drive that with some other numbers, and then suddenly, if they wanted our character to move forward, it would be moving upward instead. So there, like if you were in a real production environment, you would want to fix that in the pipeline. For what you're wanting to do with this project, like really, we're just trying to get something that looks convincing as a playable game. Not necessarily, like we're not going to ship this out to a whole bunch of people and they're going to bug test it and stuff. Like that's just not the scope of this class. Right? So no, if you, however you get it to work, yes, that's fine. You may run into a couple of smaller issues. So one of the issues you might run into is that your character is coming in. Anybody getting a really tiny character or an enormous character? Yeah. Is it possibly 10 or 100 times too small?
It was 5.
5. Interesting. Okay. So Maya has a set of units, and it usually should match up to Unreal's set of units. So 1 unit in Maya is 1 unit in Unreal. Sometimes people don't model something in Maya to be the actual scale, though. Especially if they had no intentions of it ever going into a game engine or whatever. I created this character thinking I was making her to the right scale. I don't know what I did, because we came in and she was a little short. Maybe I was making her to the right scale for a very short person. And I think the mannequin character is a particularly tall character. I think he's like 6'5" or something. So she came in a little short, and ideally what I would do is I would have just tested that before I rigged it. But once you get that in there, you can scale the character, or you can go into Maya and change your units. So Maya thinks of 1 unit as a centimeter, and if your character is coming in like 10 times or 100 times too small, you can change that to millimeters or something like that. And then 1 unit's a millimeter and your character is an appropriate size. The other option is just once you get it in there and get it into the player, like that castle, we just scale it up, and that's what I did with mine. Now by doing that though, I am going to break something in terms of being able to test if my feet are sliding in my run. Right? I'm not necessarily breaking it as much as I'm making my math harder. So basically the way I can test this, my run speed, is I can go into Unreal and see what the run speed is set to. And if it's set to something like 600, it'll just say 600. That's 600 units per second, right? Is how fast that's moving. Well, I can go into Maya and animate my placement controller at 600 units per second, and then my run cycle is going to be playing on top of that placement controller, and I'll be able to test and see what it's going to look like in game in order to get less foot sliding. If you had to scale your character down, you have to do some math to figure out what that is, right? If you scaled it up, let's say you scaled it up by 5 times, somewhere in there you're going to have to multiply something by 5 to figure out what your actual units in Maya need to be to match up with what your units in Unreal are. I'll get to that a little bit more in the run cycle. I hope we can get to that. I think that's actually one of the really cool ways of fixing stuff. Worst case scenario, we can kind of eyeball it. Like once we kind of see what the speed is, we can get something pretty close, and we can kind of eyeball it and re-export it and eyeball it and re-export it. But that's a little sloppy and slow. Okay. Any other issues you're having that I didn't just mention?
My jump animation isn't playing. There's no errors.
Your jump animation isn't playing, but there's no errors. Okay. What I would, if you open up so if I go to my, if I go to my geometry, my CF character, my animations, if you play your jump up here, are you getting the right animation in there? Yes. Okay. We can fix it. I just don't know how yet. But I'll have to sit down with you and figure that one out. That little section, the jump cycle, that is the stuff that messes up the most. You're not getting any errors there, but there may still be some number that's off in the transition and it's just blending completely over it. Is it just staying in the idle when it jumps?
No, the run.
Staying in the run. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, so I'll just help you come through it. It's almost definitely in that state machine though. Yeah, Amy? It isn't playing anymore?
Well, it plays in here, but it doesn't play in the game.
So if you hit the play button.
It doesn't go in that
Okay.
or the run.
Okay. So those are two I think are probably in the same thing. That was probably in the state machine.
This is less of an error. It's more just when he crouches down to do the jump, the pill is going up.
Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting one. We'll look at this in the jump. So what's happening on villains, you may get this too, is as soon as you tap the space bar, that little capsule shape is going to launch up in the air. So if your animation includes your character crouching down and then jumping, what's going to happen is your character is going to start crouching as the pill goes up in the air, and then he's going to jump after his feet are already off the ground. So what I did on mine, if you notice, like this is my idle animation. I start my jump up animation from the down pose, right? So instead of my first frame is already crouched. So I think I would just try exporting it from that point. Unfortunately, it looks fake, right? It doesn't feel completely realistic because I was kind of going to wait to get to the jump lecture to talk about this, but our job as animators in games is to make the player's choices or the player's actions feel like they were, that there was a result from them, right? So if you tap your space bar and you had to wait even a fraction of a second for the character to crouch before they jumped, it would feel unsatisfying, right? And so even though we lose some of that actual physics to the, they didn't have time to crouch, we get that physics of them feeling like they launched off the ground correctly. And at the right rate. So you may be able to squeeze in like a 1 frame crouch down, but I think that what's going on with yours is it's crouching a little too long. There's ways we could fake it, which is to actually animate your character. So you have 1 frame where they go down, and then frame 1 will be frame 1 is the idle, frame 2 is them going downward, but the capsule will already be traveling upward at that point. So that means you would have to actually push their feet to the floor a little bit as they were pushing off. So you can kind of fake it. If you actually go back and look at the mannequin character, I think this is a pretty neat little element to this. And our mannequin character in the animation, on his jump up, where's it at? They're calling it jump start. So he starts from already down as well, but his feet travel backwards through this. And then on his landing, his feet kind of land and let them settle, right? So theirs is a little different than what we're doing, and that kind of works, but that means he'll always fall in that pose where he's getting ready to hit the ground. So you can kind of do that a little bit if you want to. I also like the feet pushing backwards. That really works if you jump while you're running, because then it feels like you're jumping forward, not upward. But it's not necessary to do all of that. We can kind of make these work in a couple of different scenarios. But that's probably what's going on with yours is that, and we can tweak with that to make it work. The jump is going to be the one that probably requires, strangely, the least amount of animation and the most amount of tweaking to make it look like the right reaction. It's actually one of the reasons I leave it in there, because we could pretty easily show off, look, our character can run around a little bit. But part of being a games animator is making sure it's functional, just like motion blur is part of being a film animator, right? All right, so let's talk just a minute. Any last other errors you all are having in yours? I have a feeling I'll have to kind of sit down with most of you and get your jump to work a little bit better. But hopefully you have something in there that's working. If not, get with me before the end of the day today. Let me help you get to that point. So you have something that way you can just worry about animation for the rest of the class. So the element that I was having an error with, and still am having an error with, is that my punch animation works, but it's actually the only thing that works. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple. I didn't finish what I started. When I go back to my third-person blueprint, you'll remember that the way we got the punch to work was through this little node here, right? We created this. When you press the left mouse button, it will play the animation, and the animation it's going to play is the CF character punch animation, right? So, so I don't necessarily know why it starts this way, but what we have here are two different things telling our character which animation to play. One of them is saying, use that blueprint we made that says, you know, you got the run and the idle and the jump and all of that. And then this thing we just created said, no, only play the punch animation when this thing is clicked. So it's kind of got like two different sets of instructions, and it's just defaulting to the most immediate one, right? So it's not going back into that blueprint. So, so we actually have to kind of fix this. The way we do this is we actually need one more thing in here, two more things in here, to make this go back to the animation blueprint. So I'm going to add a play animation, and it is, what's it called? Play animation, or is it set animation? Give me 1 second here. Yes. So it's set animation mode mesh. So at this point, this is where we want to be using the animation blueprint. So basically what we had here is whenever we created this play animation node, we were saying, play the punch animation. And I could very easily just drag that character out there and it would just sit there and punch at the air forever, right? That's what it thinks I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I have an animation blueprint there, and sort of that play animation sort of overrode that animation blueprint. So what I need to say is only play this animation blueprint when we click that mouse button, but then after it's done, go ahead and set it back to the blueprint. So the problem with that is we don't know how long, like if I just plug straight in from here to here, they would be fighting each other, right? I would click the mouse button to play the punch animation, and then as soon as I was done clicking, it would just not play the punch animation and set it back to the animation blueprint. So I don't really need it to do it immediately, right? I need it to do it eventually. And so what that means is I need to have a delay in there. And my delay should be the same length as my punch animation. So I can go to my animation layers here, and you see where I have my punch right here. If I mouse over it, you'll see that this sequence length is 1.266667. Right? That is the number I need to remember. 1.2, 4 6s and a 7. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my blueprint, and I'm going to right click and type in delay. And the number I need in this duration is the length of my idle animation. I'm sorry, my punch animation. Your punch animation may be a different length. Probably is a different length. If it is, you need to put in that length, not my length, right? So mine was 1.2, my number pad isn't working, is it? 1.2, try it again here. 1.2666667. It's probably more precise than I really needed to be, but whatever. So if I pipe this into the delay, and then after that delay is completed, I pipe this into the set animation node, then this is what we get. Whenever I click my left mouse button on our mesh, which is our character that we're using, right, it will start playing the CF character punch animation. While it's playing that, it's going to disable our run animation and our idle animation and all the jump stuff, right? And it's going to disable that until this delay is over, which is exactly the length of our animation. And then it's just going to set us right back into the blueprint so our animation can start playing the run and the idle and the jump again, right? So if we do that, hit compile, hit save, what I should get now is when I hit play, I can punch. Oh, really?
Oh, we got one. We got the jump.
Is there something else I haven't compiled? Use animation blueprint. Oh. I don't know why I set that to get. This should be get speed. Set that to there. Compile, save. I think I broke it when I was trying to fix it. There she is. She's running again. She's running really fast too. What's her go? And jumping really high. Yay. Okay, so that was it. It was, so to let you see what I did there, when I was trying to fix it last time in this default idle run right here, I had this set. When you drag this speed in here, it asks, do you want to get speed or set speed? And I wanted to get speed, but when I was trying to fix it, I tried set speed and then just forgot to undo that. So that was just an error on my part. So I can help you work through this. The interesting thing is once you get kind of used to this, there's only like 5 or 6 moving parts in this whole thing. Like only 5 or 6 different things that we could break. So the physics thing, I just need to do a touch more research on that before I try to stand up here and teach it. So I will get to that as like another little catch-up thing in the next couple of days. And if I learn to fix it quickly, I will go ahead and send out an email with a video of it. Oh, I should back up just a second. Early semester progress reports are due, I think the 25th. I wanted to let you know, I put in a couple of grades. I'm in the process of grading Project 1, but what I'm doing for you in grading Project 1, I meant to talk about this at the beginning of class, I'm making you a video. So some of you are going to start to see stuff that pops up on your sync sketch, and you're going to be like, what does that mean? The video will explain it. Basically what I'm doing in the video is I'm recording me drawing in your sync sketch, and so those notes may not make sense until you get until you get your video. I wanted to get that done today. It'll probably be tomorrow. I'm gonna get the grades done tomorrow for sure. So you should have all your grades in the class up to Project 1 by then. One of the things that is going to happen that may be a little confusing to you for the people who are taking this class as Animation 2 or 3, you all are doing, some of you are doing your project as a two a two-project project, right? Like it takes up two different assignments because it's a larger piece. There are multiple characters, whatever the situation is. The more I look at that, the more I think probably the best way to grade that is to let you finish the project and leave your project 1 grade empty until you finish that, and then apply the grade to both elements of it, right? So like some of you just did blocking. I don't want to just give you a blocking grade because blocking is unfinished, and how do you revise it, right? So what I would rather do is look at what you have at the end and say, how do we break this up into 2 grades? Some of you, it was one really long, complicated piece, so whatever grade you get on the final thing is what you get for project 1 and 2. Some of you, like Sean, this may be your question, you have 2 characters in yours. And so probably what we'll do is after you're done with yours, you'll get a grade for character 1 and a grade for character 2. Does that make sense? And I'll just define that in there. But since it's in blocking right now, I don't want to give you, I'm giving you feedback on it, but I don't want to give you a grade that doesn't represent that. So the interesting thing about that is you're going to be getting early semester progress reports after the 25th. And I don't want to give you a 0 or a placeholder grade in there that makes that grade disproportionately look incorrect, right? So like, for example, like if you missed one of the smaller ones, your grade in D2L right now will look low, even though that's not accurate, probably because your project grade carries so much weight. So what I'm going to give you in there is that if you're in class 1, you've turned everything in, you'll be getting the regular ABCD grades in there. If you're in class 2 or 3 and that is sort of the situation you're in, I will either put in, there's an option in there for a pass or a fail. And pass in this case just means you're on the right path, keep going on this path, right? And so that grade is really just to say, yeah, they're still coming to class. But because I don't want that grade to be misleading in any way or have any impact on it. So, did that answer your question?
Actually, I was going to say, if you wanted to give a grade, you could go ahead and give a grade based on the blocking pass, and then just change the grade later, like as a revision, like you're planning to do already.
And I could do that. I think right now, like if right now, I think the feedback will be most helpful. And then what we'll do is I'll probably sit down with each of you, and if it's a 2-project piece, we'll decide how you want to divide it up. So for example, like yours has 2 characters, so we could divide it up into 2 characters. Amy, yours has multiple animations, so maybe we'll grade it as if it's just two different sets, right? Like 4 of the animations for project 1, 4 of the animations for project 2. Chris, yours is a much larger piece, so maybe you would want to do it as like multiple, like whatever you're done with that segment of it, then it's just 1 grade for both projects. But I'll talk to you each about that. There's somebody else in here who's repeating the class too, right there. Oh yes, yeah. Hey, so like we'll talk about, I'll chat with you about yours, how you want to break that up. Yours is really just taking up 1 assignment, right?
Yeah.
So I'll probably just go ahead and do that as a graded piece for you. And anyway, I just wanted to let you know the grades are going to be coming in a way that may seem confusing to you at first. So sorry to interrupt the lecture with that, but it gives you an idea. Parker, is yours 1 piece or is yours 2?
I have 1.
All right, cool. Then I'll probably just give you a flat grade on that. The biggest reason is because I still want those to be revisable. And if I were grading the blocking, I mean, really, that means you couldn't revise it because you moved past it, right? So at that point, revising it just meant I continued to move on. So it would still just be the same result. You got the same grade for 1 and 2, right? Did that make sense? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I meant to sort of talk about that at the beginning of class. So. Okay, how many of you are really, really, really hating the Unreal part of this? Anybody? Parker, you're not even doing this project. It's just, you're not even in this class.
I think we're bringing up past promise.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this: how many of you are enjoying it more than you thought? I'm always surprised by that because like I drag you through this thing that's very technical and kind of annoying, but there is there's really something gratifying about being able to play your own character animation, isn't there? Like, even if it's the bad stud animation you made, that gets better. The better and better it looks, it's a really nice feedback loop of like, oh, that looks good, and I did it, right? And then it's kind of like you get to constantly get a version of what you get when you render your piece and it looks good, right? Somebody up there?
I was gonna say, I think it's because like a character can run more than 2 feet without taking like 40 copies of work.
Well, yeah, you can easily, like, after you're done with all this, you're like, I'm going to record 2 hours of my character running. And like, you can do it in real time, right? But you also get to experiment with your creation, right? You're like, oh, I wonder if I can make him jump on top of this thing. Right? I wonder if I can make it punch this thing. And you start to get to see your animation slightly differently than how you created it, right? And it's like it really did come to life, right? And so there's a really cool element of it. I think the other cool part about this is, you remember when we were doing that first project? I was like, you'll be working on this for 40 hours, and like, you don't want to wait 40 hours to get that gratification of, wow, I did a good job, right? These animations are much shorter, right? So some of you may be already like getting some good versions of your punch or your run in there. And like, the timeline to do these, like, this is going to sound a little terrifying to you. In the industry, I would probably be knocking out 2 to 3 animations a day this length, right? An animation set for one of the like smaller Civ characters, like one of the unit characters, I think there were 14 animations in there, and we got on average 5 to 7 days to do one of them, right? And that sounds crazy, but like, some of them were less than 3 frames long. You know, some of them were super fast, and like, there's something about that. It's like, oh, all 14 of those look good. I'm really getting stuff done, right? And I know it sounds like I'm harping on that a little bit much, but really, like, the older you get, the more like time you work in this, the more you'll start to realize that life is really just tricking your psychology into thinking everything's great. like, it really, like, sometimes it is. Like, if your job is feeling frustrating, sometimes you have to make yourself be like, no, I'm excited about this. I'm going to enjoy this, right? And that is one of the things about this is it's very easy to find things that feel gratifying about it. The thing that most people hate about it is it's also very easy to hit hurdles that are technical hurdles and hard to overcome and just make the whole process frustrating, right? And so when you're hitting those, please come get me, please let me help you fix that. I have a feeling this is the project where I'll be sitting at your desk helping you solve problems the most. Okay, animation-wise, I want to take just like, it's a short one. I'm going to take maybe like 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most, probably not that much, and show you how I do an idle animation. Okay, so we can get one of these in the can pretty early, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of animate that one live. It's going to be a little like, it's not like blocking the shots that we did before where I was like, I felt like I needed to show you a time lapse of it. Because really, it's just one trick, and you're going to repeat it over and over and over again. This is one of the only animations that I'm ever going to encourage you to do in a way that is not the pose-to-pose method, right? Because our idle animation is really just one pose, right? Like if your character is idling like this, like that's not an idle act, that's just a silly dance, right? And it's very hard if you're doing the pose-to-pose method of like trying to get like breathing poses. Your character will just start feeling like he's doing this, right? And like it's like really all you need is one strong pose, right? So that's what I want to do. I'm going to go in here to my female character that I'm working on. Let me set the project again. Open scene, set project. Body mechanics rigs, set. Go ahead and open up this one. No. It's this one. And let this open. So first things first, I want to make sure I'm in my idle animation. So I'm going to go to my game exporter. and go ahead and just set my timeline to the idle. You'll see that for me, that's 125 to 250, so what is that? That's about 125 frames, right? So I can always change the length of this if I feel like that's too long, but I'm okay with that length. In all honesty, idles can be different lengths depending on the type of game you're creating. If you're animating like an action game, the idle may be short and kind of repetitive. If you're animating a game that is like maybe a top-down strategy or something, your StarCraft or something like that, your characters are going to spend a lot of time idling, so they want to have some variety in there, so they'll make the idles longer. The big thing though is I don't want to go too far away from my base pose. Whenever you're doing a character, this is actually the whole first pass. They will send you the character and they'll say, get me some idle poses. And you'll send your art director, you'll talk to your animation lead, and you'll get them 5 or 6 different strong idle poses. Because this is the pose that your player is going to see your character in the most. Right? Anytime they stop moving at all, to look around, to do whatever, your character is going to go back to this pose. And if it's a bad pose, then it weakens the whole character. So this should tell us something about our character. The other thing is, a lot of your other animations are going to transition from this pose into that animation. So for example, I have to go from my idle pose to my run animation, right? And my run animation, the first pose of that is my passing pose, so it's really just her picking up one leg. So I don't want to do some crazy idle pose where she's like standing on one leg with like the other one tucked back behind it or something, because then that transition is going to feel sharp, right? So your idle pose should carry some attitude of the character, personality of the character, but it should also be just sort of something that is maintainable, right? So like if it's like this, like after about a minute of this is going to start feeling really like, why is she still holding her arm up like that, right? Like you have to make sure that it's something that feels sustainable. Yeah.
When you said that it asked for 5 idle poses, you mean 5 that they would cycle through, or just 5 kind of?
You just got five still images or something like that. 5 is sort of like it's really like develop your idle pose, and usually how I do that is I give them a couple to choose from. So it's not always they say 5, but yeah, it's just like this is kind of the personality I was going for. And you want to establish that early because they may be like, oh no, pull their chest up, and you don't want to have to you want to set that early so you don't have to go back and change all of the start poses for your other animations, right? So I'm going to just spend some time. This is, you remember, like sometimes I feel like I'm Mr. Miyagi. So you remember back in Animation Fundamentals when I made you do those 5 poses of Binbot? Now you know why. Oh, look at it. It all came back, and you're like, sweep the leg, Johnny, and you're like, nuh-uh, right? So, anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a pose like in that same way we were creating poses earlier. We're just going to craft a simple pose that tells us something about this character's personality, right? Do you want her to be confident? Do you want her to be nervous? Do you want her to be like cocky? Do you want her to be bored? Right? What is it you're going for? Or she could just be ready for action, right? She's like, I'm going to have to run soon. Let's be ready for action. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time doing that. You don't have to follow along because I would like you to invest time in figuring this pose out. But just so I can show you here, I'll make a pose that doesn't suck too bad. That's what I'll be aiming for. Does not suck too bad. So again, first thing, I gotta fix these feet. Like that drives me nuts when the feet are perfect like this, right? So I'm gonna move those a little bit, maybe get just a little bit of asymmetry on them. I'm going to get her a little bit of a weight shift. So I'm going to shift her weight over one leg just a little bit. So by doing that, I'm going to expect that her contrapposto maybe does something like this, right? Like this leg is sort of driving up into her hip. And so if that's the case, maybe getting some contrapposto like this, right? So again, kind of looking at her from all directions. lean her back just a little bit. So something like this. It feels like we're kind of going for something that's feeling a little bit confident now, right? To add to that, maybe a little bit of like this cock to the head, right? Work down the arms, get her something that's feeling less tense, right? If your shoulders are up, she'll feel more tense. If they're down a little bit, she'll feel a little bit more relaxed. I'm not going to just completely put her hand on her hip, just because I don't, that's something I would have to blend in and out of a lot. So I'm just going to kind of get like that loose hand to the side thing here. Again, it's not really unheard of to spend like hours on these first few poses, right? Because these are really going to drive so much of your animation. Clean up her hands a little bit, something like this, a little bit of some curve to it. I don't want quite as much spread on this. I'm going to pull some of them together. Grab these, get some curl to them. And then I'm going to keep this finger a little more forward. So maybe something like that. And then this pose. So I'm trying to not get too much symmetry going on here, but I also don't really, at least for me in this one, I don't really want to put her in a pose. Oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I don't have auto key turned on. This is so dangerous. Let me grab all my controls really quick. I'm also doing this on frame 214 for some reason. Okay, let's go ahead and move this back here. I'm going to do this on frame 125. Ooh, that was close. I almost lost my whole pose. I'm going to get her hand a little more loose. So, do what?
Are you middle mouse dragging when you have all the different fingers?
Yep. So how I'm adjusting this, I'm highlighting I'm grabbing those. I'm grabbing this middle and end joint right there, and then I'm middle clicking to adjust those values. Huh? Well, that's all right. I usually do them together to get them close, but then I go back through and kind of make them each a little bit more unique. And so by doing them individually, you're going to actually get a more unique pose. So that's fine. But that might save you a little bit of time doing it that way. So this is just a little trick I like. If you're wanting your character to feel angry, like this is more like neutral, like your hand is just kind of hanging loose, right? If you want them to be angry, you can rotate these fingers back and then curl these fingers in. You can start getting this like angry feel to the hand. So that's like a neat little like pose trick I use sometimes because it feels tense, right? Like, and really what I'm trying to go for here is maybe a little more loose. Huh? Yeah. So now I'm just kind of wondering, should I shift it over this way instead? It feels a little bit too much, doesn't it? Maybe a little bit. Maybe something like this, and I'm going to put them just a touch closer together, like this. Okay. I'm also, I think I don't want this to come across as like, I still want this to come across with an air of feminine to it. So there's something that feels like assertive and masculine if you get your elbows pointed out like that, and it probably is the cowboy thing, right? You get this like make yourself bigger because you want to fight, and that's usually not. I mean, I hate like making gross generalizations like that, but that's usually not something we see as like a feminine personality, right? So one of the things you can do though is if you tuck the elbows in a little bit, that feels just a touch more like controlled. And like my wife always comments on this, like I'll just like walk around like flopping my arms everywhere. She's like, no, I always know where all of my body parts are. Like I'm in control of myself. I don't think that dudes are always that. So I think like just having your elbows tucked in, that just reads as like she's a little bit more in control, and that's a sign of readiness as well. So I'm going to do that just a little bit in here. So maybe a little bit of something like this. So again, like I'm whoa, I didn't realize I had them both selected. So again, I'm kind of almost overthinking this pose, just because I want to be ready for anything that can come up in the future, right? So I think I'm liking this. I think this is looking pretty close to what I want for her. So I'm just going to go through here, select all of these, and make sure that frame 125, I hit S. I'm going to copy that frame, copy, paste it on 250. So this is a completely different pose. I'm going to delete all this other junk out of here. Delete. And so now she should pretty much just stay in those two poses. Now you see we got a little bit of movement in there, and that's actually just coming from the graph editor. So that's cool because we're actually getting ready to open the graph editor anyway. So I'll go to animation. And the reason we're getting a little bit of that motion in there is because these aren't set to auto. Like some of them were set to spline. And so I'll set that to auto. I'm also just going to go ahead and take this time to set everything to weighted tangents. So I'll go to curves, weighted tangents. Okay. Now you remember when I showed you how to create that shortcut key for the add key tool? And do you remember in animation fundamentals how I had you navigate that arrow all the way through that maze? Like that was in preparation for this. Again, I'm like, I should be training you to fight Cobra Kai. So anyway, we're gonna, all that was is that is a way that you often have to animate. That's all I'm going to do. I don't actually set any keyframes past this idle pose, right? I'm going to draw some general sway to this character, right? One channel at a time. So I'll go in here, I'll grab my root control, translate X. Which one is that? That's the side-to-side motion, right? So I want just a little bit of side-to-side motion in this. I'll go in here, keys, add key tool, and I'll just start sort of drawing some, just a sort of a random graph, right? And then I'll hit play and see if that looks bad or if I can even notice it. So if I can't notice it, then it may be too small, or if maybe it's too big. The cool thing about this is once I have these keyframes in there, I can change that pretty easily, right? Remember, I can highlight all of these and hit W and move them, right? But I can also highlight all of them, hit R, and scale them. So now that I have this curve, I can scale this curve up and down, start getting a little bit more motion on there, right? To me, it's probably a little too much once it starts getting kind of noisy here at the end. I'm going to go ahead and set my shortcut keys to that again. So it's settings and preferences, hotkey editor. This is just so I have it. Choose a category, editors, graph editor, add key tool. I use T. Save and close. There we go. And so maybe try something like this. Now, here's something I want you to recognize. Watch what happens when I get to the end. Well, let me just scrub so you can see it on my timeline. Right. As I start here at the beginning of this animation, right, the curve is here. As I move forward, like we're just sort of going through that curve from side to side. And when I get to the end, what happens after I get to the end? So it slows down. What happens after that? Loops, right? So we go back.
Oh, this is the infinity thing, right? Like the.
Yeah, it can be. In this one, I'm not going to use infinity just because I have it all in one shot. I can show you how, and if you don't want to have all of your files in one shot, I'll actually show you that here in a minute. But what I want to be able to do here is predict that whatever happens after this, just like I can see here, I go into this key, and I know what happens after it is this curve here. I want to start imagining that when I get to this key, what starts happening is this, following that, right? So if I have this curve like this, and like this, when I'm playing this in a loop, there's going to be a pop there, right? Because it's going to like bounce like a bouncing ball off of the end of this, right? So you can't really see it there, but yes?
Is there a way, like, in Unreal to have multiple idols, so then you do a blend between each one? So like,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Did you do that with this too, just like one idol? Or?
You could. So, let me go ahead and undo that really quick. So the question was, can you have multiple idols in Unreal? You can. Usually what you have in Unreal is multiple states. So your character is either, let's say your character gets more and more angry as they go along. You have like your neutral idol, your angrier idol, your like enraged idol, right? Something else that people do, and you'll see this a lot when you're playing a game, if you just stop moving your mouse or stop, put your joystick down or controller down, after the character sits there for a few minutes, then they'll like do like something like this, and they'll like dust off their shirt or something. That is part of the idol. We often call that a fidget. Like that's to keep your character from just seeming like they loop forever, right? So you can add those in, but you have to kind of control those in Unreal programmatically.
So it'd be like a blend after like so long instead of But it wouldn't be done in this idol. I'm sorry.
No, you'd do two different animations. So you'd have and it would kind of be two different versions of this idol, right? So I have this loop that's going on forever. What Parker was talking about is if I deleted all of these keys before and after this, of course that has the rest of my animations on it, right? We can actually see how this loops by going to View, Infinity, and we'll see that there's sort of this invisible line that goes off forever here. And that's because as soon as we get to this curve, we don't make any more changes, so it goes on forever, right? If I go to curves, pre-infinity and post-infinity, right now what it's set to is, I think, constant, right? So it's set to just be constant, whatever that last keyframe is, forever. But if I set it to cycle, it will start to play my animation over and over and over again. This is one of the benefits if you wanted to do each of these animations in their own file. This is one of the reasons that this could be useful. So you could also do it in a couple of different ways. You could have an idle Maya file and a run Maya file, so you can make it loop. And then you could have your punch, your jump in another file, right? And that way you can keep them together. The reason I have to put them all in one file is because it's much easier to export from one file. So you could kind of look at this either way, but the problem with this is if you have, and you can do this in the pre-infinity too, where it goes back negatively. If you go curves, pre-infinity cycle, you'll see it go that way forever. And so if we were to go in here and break this tangent right here, I gotta hit W for that. You'll see that I'm starting to get this little hitch right there, right? And so that's going to make it not feel like a perfect loop. It's going to feel like a pop right there. So if I hit R, scale this up where you can kind of see it, you'll feel her side-to-side movement when it gets here to this loop point about here. Oh, wait, what? Right there, you're going to kind of feel it pops just a little bit. So now that we know that this is how it works, I'm going to undo to before all this infinity stuff to where I still had all of my keyframes out there before and after it, right? And now for me, I'm just going to imagine it. Like I've gotten pretty good at this to where I can sort of envision what that infinity will look like even without having to do it. If you feel like you need to work in a single file for that, that just means when you export, if you need to re-export everything, it just takes you a few more minutes, right? For a set this size, it's really not that big of a deal. So I just wanted to do it all in one file, so when we got started, we didn't have to do this 5 times, basically. Okay, so I have my curves here, and this is just on my side-to-side motion. Again, I'm going to scale them up just a little bit. They're feeling just kind of a little small to me. Okay, so I have that on my Translate X. I can go in here now and just do the same thing on Translate Y. So T. So Translate Y is her up and down. It's probably not going to have quite as much, so maybe I'll do something like this. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. A little too much. Right? So if I hit F, I can get an idea of what this is. Hit R, and just start scaling that down until it feels about right. If I translate Z, T, so this is my forward and back. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of motion on that, nothing nearly as much as my side to side. So I feel like my up and down is still a little too much. The up and down isn't going to have very much at all because the character usually isn't doing too much there. If you're going to put up and down anywhere, like probably what you could do is if she shifts from one leg to the other, it would probably dip just a little bit in that shift. So I'm actually going to scale this back pretty significantly. So I don't really want too much side to side. Now, it's probably really subtle on your screen. This is where it's going to start amplifying a little bit. I'm making it subtle intentionally. Don't worry about it. If you push it too big, you can always go back and scale those curves back down. But this is just movement, right? So don't stop at movement. Your character is also going to have a little bit of rotation on the hips, right? And that rotation, again, the pendulum, remember, that first pendulum, its action is sort of preceding all those other pieces. So we're just going to pendulum up the spine, right? So whatever I'm getting in this rotation here, I may add that to the spine and just have a little bit of lag in there, a little bit offset to it.
Is that follow through or what is that like?
Yeah, follow through and overlapping action. There's so many different words. Actually, for those of you who are, if anybody's going to ECGC this year, that's one of the talks I've submitted. It's called Demystifying Overlapping Action, because there's like 7 different words about overlapping action. What does it actually mean?
Do they mean the same thing, like follow through?
They're all elements of the same thing. Basically, what that principle really should be called is not everything happens at the same time. And those are all different elements of not everything happens at the same time.
Offset, like
Offset, overlapping action, overshoot, drag. All of those are elements that show that those. It's really that the forces are affecting different objects at different times. Actually, if I get that talk put together relatively early, I may do a dry run on you all if you're interested in it. Okay, so we got this translation. I know this is a little like dull to watch somebody draw curves, but you're going to start seeing the results in your own pretty soon, right? So I want to go in here and get some rotation in this. One of the things I like is whenever my character moves in one direction, I like to drag in the other direction. I think she's moving a little too much forward and back. Like that, right? But I'm going to go ahead and scale up my X again just so I can see it really well. And that way in my rotate X, I can drag that. So as she shifts over this way, I can drag, this is her forward and backward rotation. I'm actually just going to put a few things in here to give us something, but I'm not super concerned about that. It's going to be her Y. So as she like moves from side to side, like as she moves over, I'm going to drag and overshoot, right? So if I go to here, I want to overshoot in this direction, right? And that means I want to drag from the other. So as she's moving in that direction, I want to drag back this way. So if you look at that, what happens, her hips move first, drags, and then she kind of overshoots to there, right? And so I'll just go ahead and kind of go through here and do the continuation of all of this. Where is she? And even if I'm making this way too big, I'm okay with that because I can always scale this down, right? I'm going to set this to linear so it does that. There we go. Or flat. So now if we watch this, so that's way too big, but what that means is I can go in here and scale down the translates a little bit, scale down, rotate Z just a little bit, and now we have that's still pretty big, now we have a much more subtle version of that. Maybe still just a touch too big. So the Y is actually just some twist. And so I'm going to add just a little bit of this in here just to make it feel a little looser. Actually, let me continue that out here a little bit. It's a little smaller. Now something to check out here, like this is not going to transition very smoothly from the beginning to the end, right? Because my curve here, right, is traveling upward. My curve here is traveling upward, but here and here, it flattens out. So one of the ways I can make sure that sort of flows smoothly is just to make it look like it continues to flow smoothly, right? Like that. So as it flows upward here, it'll just continue straight into here and continue going up, right? And so I'll maybe pull back just a little bit. Actually, I want to pull back on the timing of that. It feels like she's hitting it a little late. No, actually, I kind of like the other timing a little bit better. Okay. So I just went through and created 6 curves, right? I would encourage you just to do this all the way through the entire body, right? You're just getting some like subtle motion on everything. And it's going to start to, like, as you work up the spine, her whole body's going to start feeling looser. And if you are building in some overlap on that, like if I added like a little bit of delay on when those curves happen, the whole thing's just going to feel looser. I will show you a trick that can be disastrous if you do it incorrectly, or it could be lazy. Like it could start to look lazy if you do it incorrectly. But I just drew all of those curves. That is the way I would encourage you to do it. But recognize that there's kind of a couple of cheats to that, right? The rotation for rotate Y here, right? That's that forward and back motion. That's the same rotation for rotate Y on this control as well, right? If I look at that, it's that forward and back motion. So if I grab both of those curves and I do rotate Y and rotate Y, I can kind of go in here and copy what I'm doing in this curve on this curve, right? So T, I can go in here and make it go up a little bit, right about there. And it's not, I may not do it exactly, but if I do a little bit of something like this, then maybe I can start getting a similar result, right? And so we can start to use some of that information that way. Now, the way this could get disastrous is you could actually just steal it, like if you want to steal this curve from rotate Y here, if I highlight all of these keyframes and hit Control C, you have to be careful because I hit Control C immediately after copying them in the graph editor. If I hit Control C after clicking up here, I'm copying an object, right? But if I select all of these and hit Control C, right, I just copied that curve. And so then I could go to here and select my rotate Y and go here to my first keyframe and hit Control V. Now, what happened is it changed my pose though. See how it kind of pasted it down there on 0? If you watch how this curve changes when I hit Control V, it didn't paste connect, it pasted over top of, right? So I could go to my edit, paste, and choose my options box here. And I think I do insert and connect and hit paste keys. And there we go.
Oh, so
It pastes it to its
it
location.
moved it down or did.
Mhm.
So, question.
And I could do this with all of them. Yep. What was
Is
that?
this method like, would you use this for like in film, to make something look like it has noise? Is this the same process? Like you have keyframe set, but you want it to have like little twitches. Is this what you would do? Or is this...
Sorry, I just realized that when I paste connect, it shifts my whole curve down. So let me undo that. And I'll come back to that question though. I think what I have to do here, let me figure this out, because I select these, Control C, and then I go here, Control, Edit, Paste. I think I still want merge, don't I? Crap. That's annoying. So it's going to shift them. I think that there's still ways we can make it not shift them. One of the things you could do though is you can grab just the central keys, Control C, see where that first one starts, and then go to here and hit Control V. No. Edit, paste, insert, merge. Yeah. And so it's going to shift it down, but then I can move this up now to line up with this. So what were you saying, Parker? I'm sorry.
I was saying like whenever you animate for film and you want to add like a little bit of noise, like it's not this is it the same thing as this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, you're going to use this all over the place. I use this in a lot of ways. There's actually I've watched a tutorial once this guy did, or it's like a lesson he did, because. So I said like for game animation, you may have like to be doing 2 or 3 animations a day. Animation for TV sometimes gets even more ridiculous. Like your timeline on that, maybe 2 minutes a week of 3D animation. And there's no possible way of doing that at the same level of what we're doing for this times, right? So you have to learn some shortcuts, and this is one of the shortcuts that he showed. It doesn't mean that this is a high quality solution. This is a problem solving solution, right? And it seems like this paste with the paste connect works a little bit better if you're doing it on an empty timeline. So kind of be careful with it, but you kind of get what I'm saying here. With that now, I have this rotation curve on here, and even if you can't see it that well, I can go in here and scale it up on this curve, and we can start getting some noticeable rotation on there on the forward and back, right? And then the cool thing about this is since this is one step up, I could just make that happen, one frame later, and now we're going to start getting this overlapping action to it, right? So is this making sense? What I'm doing here? I would say like for you at this point, just partially out of practice and partially out of learning how to control it, I would do each of these curves manually. And that sounds like I'm asking you to do more work. It's not. It's that you will get better at learning to control this curve. And then once you learn to control that curve, you can use these shortcuts of like copying and pasting curves, right? I was actually kind of even reluctant to mention it because as you saw, like I could really screw up those animations that are after this if I'm not careful. And also, if you accidentally have part of your rig selected and you copy and paste that instead of your keyframes, you may actually just crash mine. Because what I was going to try to do is duplicate your rig.
In the graphic.
In the graphic. Like it's just
Explodes. To be fair, I accidentally duplicated one of my rig pieces a while back. It didn't crash anything. I was just trying to do animations on the wrong rig.
yeah.
An hour. I couldn't figure out why it didn't work.
Yeah, so I kind of want to point out that you can do this, like just kind of be prepared for it, right? All right. Oh wait, I wonder. Sorry, let me try something really quick and see if this fixes it. Because one of the other things we may be able to do is delete those and then grab, rotate here, that, Control C. Just gonna try this and see if this works a little bit better. Go to this frame, edit, paste. I want to do insert, connect. Still shifted it, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Edit, paste. Anyway. So this is just some little tips on ways of doing this. Your idle is not a very impressive animation to show off sometimes, right? Sometimes you feel like, but they're not doing that much. In the sake of the animation for the project, your idle is sometimes one of the most important animations, right? Like, I can show you any paused frame from God of War, and you know what he's thinking, right? Like, he's going to slay some giant monsters. Or gods, I guess is what he's going to say. So, like, you understand that from the character. It is really important to help communicate the character. So don't think that this is like the easy one you phone in because there's not a lot of action in it. Actually, to me, the easiest animations are always the biggest animations. Like a giant punch, I can crank one of those out in an hour. An idle sometimes takes me like 3 hours. But it's very important to kind of get that solid because everything leads in and out of that.
Because the timing just makes sense though. It's like, I don't know.
Well, it's like, it's real, like if it's a fast punch, even if the pose is big,
Yeah.
like the transition sometimes is 2 frames, right?
Yeah.
And I just have to get 2 frames that transition correctly. And idle, I have to get 125 of them that seem like they're all transitioning correctly. And like subtle animation, you notice errors in it way more than you notice it in fast animation, just because for the same reason that referees make bad calls sometimes, like you just miss it, right? And so like I think that this is this is an important one that I would say spend a little time on it. It's not going to be the glamorous one, but it's going to be important when you're showing this off because it gives you a foundation for all of your other animations to go back to and still feel like they're alive. So, all right, that's all I really wanted to cover today. It took a little bit more time than I expected it to. Yeah, question? So we have till 2:05, so we got about 15, 20 minutes left. I'm going to just kind of hop around and help you all get some stuff fixed. Next class period, all I'm really going to go over is the run cycle, how to make a solid run cycle. I'd say in the meantime, just keep moving forward. Don't feel like you have to wait for me to start on one of them. Like if you want to get a pass on it, that's cool. Save your versions. I'm going to cover all of the animations. So if you're also just wanting to kind of work along, that's cool. But every time, so I will show you this. Like I've made some changes here, right? Every time I make a change, I'm going to export it and put it back in the game, right? So I got my game set in here. I'm going to uncheck all of this except for my idle. I'm going to hit export. Yeah, I want to replace it. Okay. And then I can go back to Unreal, and I'll right-click on, right here, CF character idle, and say re-import with new, re-import. And so that's just going to re-import it from its old location. And now, this is my idle. So all I have to do is file, save all, and when I hit play, my game just got better, right? Like I get that little pop where I'm starting at the old idle, right? But I could fix that now too if I wanted to, because all I have to do is copy that keyframe from here at the beginning of this, because I know what my starting keyframe is. Copy that one, paste it in at the beginning of my punch. Let's just do paste, paste, and then paste, paste. And so I can also just go ahead and re-export my punch now as well, right? So this is why we do this, is because now this is really easy to edit. So now when I hit play, oh, that's neat. It kind of messed up my tangents on that middle punch pose. Feels convincing, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, so you're getting the idea of why this is important. Like sometimes in these settings, the animation lead is standing behind you being like, no, nudge the arm up just a little bit. Now export it, let's look at it. No, nudge it back down just a little bit. Now export it, let's look at it. Right? That's how that feels, and you can just, like, now you know what's going out to the player. Okay, cool. I'm gonna shut up. I could talk for a long time, as I have proven many times. And then I'll hop around and help you out with whatever you need help with. So, all right.